Hi, and welcome to episode 12 of the Give Me a Crown Knitting, Spinning and Bits and Pieces podcast. My name's Nina, also known as Give Me a Crown around the internet, and it's also the name of my Etsy shop where I sell project bags and zipper pouches and various things. And we also have a Ravelry group which you can search in the groups tab for Give Me a Crown, and there's been a lot of chatter in there recently around the Aussie Knit Along, and also in the everyday chatter thread where people are showing the various projects that they're working on, and it's fun to see the group growing and getting more chatty. Today is Monday the 26th of October 2015, and in the past week I've been watching quite a few podcast updates about Rhinebeck, and it's been fantastic to see. As much as I'd love to be able to go along and take part in a fibre festival like Rhinebeck, it's nice to be able to watch from afar as well and see what's been going on. So in particular, I've watched podcast updates from Andre Sunitz, the Yarngasm podcast, the Dyer's Notebook, Bookish Stitcher, and Tiny Paper Foxes. So thank you to all of you who have been sharing your thoughts on visiting Rhinebeck and the things that you bought and what you got up to. It's lovely to watch even from afar. This week's episode has got some knitting, spinning, and a few finished objects, and so we'll start off with the finished objects. And the first is the Midnight in Sydney shawl, which I'm wearing, and this is something that I decided to knit as part of the Aussie Knit Along in the Give Me a Crown Ravelry group, which is to celebrate and explore Australian designers and indie dyers. The pattern is by Meg Gadsby, so just as a bit of a disclaimer, in case you haven't seen this podcast before, Meg has donated a skein of yarn as a prize for the Aussie Knit Along, and I've had the pleasure of getting to know her recently when I bought some yarn and discovered that she actually lives in the neighbourhood. So I did buy the pattern because I think that she has some fantastic shawl patterns available, and this Midnight in Sydney one was the first shawl of hers that I've knit. It was a fantastic knit. The main body of the shawl is knit with some hand spun that I spun up, and then, as I was mentioning in the last episode, I had the feeling that I was going to run out of yarn, and I did. So I had this much hand spun left, and I didn't end up two-plying the singles that I had left over, but this was from the original yarn that I had left. So for the last few rows, it might not be that visible, but I've used a purple Miss Click Clack just to do the last few rows and to do the bind off. And this is the Miss Click Clack Merry Creek sock. It's looking more blue on screen, but it's a beautiful purple. So that was the first time that I've used Miss Click Clack, and I've got a few other skeins of hers to use in a future project. But I think that it worked out well. I was thinking about using a contrasting colour, but I think using a complementary purple so that it kind of blends in, but there is just a little bit of difference. I think that it works well. And I haven't actually measured the wingspan, but it's a little bit taller than me, so I'm guessing this is about 5'7", maybe 5'8" wide. Yeah, not too sure. But it's a nice shallow shawl, so that I used to wear a lot of scarves and I still do. So this is a bit of a transition from being a scarf person to being a shawl person. Not that I'm going to get a lot of use out of it anymore with spring being here, but it's I'm definitely going to be wearing this in the evenings and then once the weather cools back down after summer. This is a shawl pattern that works well for a single skein of yarn, so if I had used the whole of the fibre that I had for this spinning, then I would have definitely had enough if I'd have had 100 grams, but I only had 89, so then there was a little bit of the Miss Click Clack that needed to go into it. I love this pattern. It was an easy knit for the garter section, so it was definitely TV knitting or travel knitting, and then for the lace section there's enough interest to, or enough little sort of tricky bits to make it interesting, but also some of the gentle knitting that you don't have to be constantly referring back to a pattern. And I think that it looks beautiful. I love that lace. And I blocked this a bit differently to what the pattern suggests. So in the pattern and what other people have done, it has a bit more of a curvy, wavy edge, and I've gone with a slightly more pointed blocking because I just wanted to block it and I wasn't really paying attention to what I was doing. So when I next wash it, then I'll play around with the different methods of blocking, but I assume that if I put a blocking wire, this is going to be hard to show, if I put a blocking wire through a few picots, then it will block out a bit more wavy than pointy. What else? I think that's it, but I love it. It's fantastic. Very happy, and I think being able to knit up something from my hand spun again, which I'm going to be able to use, is just such a thrill. So I won't put this back on because it is quite warm to wear with the merino, but I'm really hoping that we have a few more cold evenings so that I can get some use out of it. Next finished object is my big cat socks. So over the last, I think 3 episodes, I've been showing off the socks that I've been knitting for my nieces. The first pair, which I thought was a tiger pair, but I've been reliably informed that they're cheetah socks, have gone off and they've been happily received. So these are white tiger socks, but we'll see what cat they decide that they are. So they're finished. I've washed them and they're ready to get bundled up. So these are for a 9-year-old, and I've used 52 stitches on 2.25mm needles, which is a US 1, and a reinforced heel and foot. And then on the toes I've made the little claw markings with a duplicate stitch. So I think I'm a little bit croaky today, you'll have to excuse that. I think they'll look better once they're actually on a foot, but they're done and I'm kind of happy to have these finished. I mean, they're done on time, which is fantastic, but I was getting a little bit needy to knit something other than just stockinette and rib. So that's that. And my next finished object is the spinning that I showed last week. So this is from some Renanoli fibre. It's a merino silk waist and tussle silk, I think it was. Ranoli is, I think there's just one woman who's a dyer down in Melbourne, and she dyes yarn and fibre. So I had some leftover singles. Oops. So this has got some of the goldy flecks in there. And I'm not sure what I'm going to do with this single just yet, but I have a few other singles lying around, and I might actually end up joining these into... There's the person across the road starting up their Harley Davidson again. Sorry about that. I might join up a few of these singles into a blanket square at some point. I didn't spin it very tightly, so I'm a little bit worried about how it's going to react, but I think once it's actually knit into a square, it should be fine. But for the main part, I made this. So this is what the fibre was. Lots of different colours, and I've just done it was a short forward draw, and I 2-plied, and it's huge. It's head sized. This is about 113 grams, I think it was, and I can't remember how many ounces that is. Quite a few. And this is the first time that when I've been taking the yarn off my bobbins, I've continued to put each plied bobbin onto my niddy doddy, and then I've just done a bit of a knot so that I can just get a single skein rather than individual skeins from each bobbin. So that's why it's huge, and also it's a bit wonky because my niddy noddy is just a small one, and it obviously isn't designed for such a huge skein. So you can't really twist it up properly. But it was a lot of fun spinning this. I have no idea what I'm going to make of it. The colours are kind of wild. But it was fun to do because as I was spinning various different colour combinations together, or as I was plying them together, I was getting some nice ideas about different types of colours to keep an eye out for when I'm next buying fibre. So I think while this might not be a yarn that I could do anything with, it definitely needs a purpose when I knit it up. It was fun experimenting with the preparation, so that it was in Rolags, and then also getting to play around with different colours and seeing what they're like. So I'll just unravel this a bit and just show that it's chunky. So there's some of the colours. And they probably won't show up on screen as nicely as what they are in person. So I've ended up with 435 metres, or about 475 yards. And I haven't measured the weight of it, but I think it's just above a fingering weight. And I'm not going to be able to skein that up, so I'm just going to gently place it over here. So I'm really happy with my spinning. It's definitely been getting better, and I've just got a few more what are they called? Bits of fibre to spin up, and then I start to check out what other fibres I can buy. I'd like to try some other fibres than merino, and to see what they're like to spin, because that's mainly what I've been spinning on my spinning wheel recently, and yeah, I'm looking forward to doing some shopping. For works in progress, I haven't had any progress on my uncle's socks, but I thought I'd show them just so that I remind myself to do the heel. These don't have to be finished until the end of November, so that's why I haven't been doing too much on them. But they look like this. This is a Sunyan sock, which is a free pattern from, oh, I've forgotten her name, Kristen F something. She is the dyer behind Skein Yarn, and it's a free pattern on Ravelry, so I need to get onto that soon. My next work in progress is my sock yarn blanket. So as in the chatter in the Give Me a Crown Ravelry group, there was somebody shared their technique for making mini skeins into mini balls of yarn. So I've been practicing this kind of technique where you get a centre pull ball and it has this little tuft up the top, which makes it easier to be able to find the centre pull yarn, and it's kind of cute. To me it looks a bit like, this one particularly looks a bit like a pineapple, a crazy coloured pineapple, but still a pineapple, and it works quite well, so I'm happy with learning that technique. So check out the group for the instructions if you want to make some like that. And I've added 3 squares to my sock yarn blanket. The first one is one that I dyed up, so it's this one here. So that was a self-striping experiment, and I'm really happy with how it turned out. Aqua with a sort of a golden browny colour. And then another square is my speckle dyed experiment, the one on the bottom there, which I'm really happy with as well. And I'm also happy with my green one. That was another dyeing experiment. So it's greens with a little bit of brown. So just those 3, but they're all hand dyed by me. And I'm definitely itching to get myself some bare yarn so that I can do some more dyeing, and also picking up some dyes. But I've been looking around for bare yarns, and Knit Picks Stroll, I think, is something that quite a few people have used, and it doesn't seem to be available until February next year, which that's not going to help me when I want to dye now. So now that I want to dye yarn now, not dye now, you know what I mean. But I've been looking at some of the other bare yarns that are available, and I'm just making up my mind about which ones I want. So hopefully there'll be some dyeing soon. And if you make a purchase from my Etsy shop and you make a little note in there that you watch the podcast, then I'll try to pop in a couple of minis for you, as long as it doesn't bump the price over the cost of the shipping into the next bracket, which it usually shouldn't do if you're buying a project bag or something like that. So yeah, I'll try to. I think with the pencil cases and smaller items I won't be able to do that, but if you're buying a project bag, then or several items, then I should be able to put a mini or 2 in there for you, either my own hand dyed or just other minis if that's what you'd like. My next work in progress is a new one. So as part of the Aussie Knit Along, I decided to cast on some new socks. and I definitely wanted to have something a little bit more challenging after the kids socks that I've been doing that were just plain stockinette and ribbing. So I saw that there is a new pattern called the Arctic Texture Socks by Linda Pomeranke. I'm sorry if I've said that incorrectly. And it's a lacy sock pattern that's it's only $1 Australian, which is around 75 US cents or 50p if you're in the UK. I'm not sure how many euros it is, but probably less than one, I think. There's only one size in the pattern, so I think that might be why it's such a cheap pattern. But it's a beautiful, beautiful sock, and there's a few people that have cast on these socks for the Aussie Knit Along. And it is a lacy sock, and I went through my stash and had a look at my sock weight yarns, and I don't have 100 grams of any single coloured sock yarns, which is a little bit strange. I think I've got heavier weight yarns in single colours with 100 grams, but since I started knitting with sock weight yarns, I seem to have picked up the self-patterning yarns, or else just strangely coloured yarns. I have some sock weight yarns that are single colours, but they don't have the nylon in them. And I think these socks are going to be going to my sister-in-law, because I've knit socks for my brother this year and for my nieces now, so I think it's only fitting that my sister-in-law also gets a pair of socks. So, because I don't have a single colour in the quantity needed, I've decided to do a lace sock with a contrast toe, possibly heel, and a cuff, which I don't think I've ever actually seen anyone do that, because lace socks are kind of elegant and beautiful, and the contrast toe and cuff just sort of seem a little bit weird. But I'm going to give it a go, and if these don't work out, then well, I'll buy some more yarn and do this pattern again. So this is how it's looking so far. So there's the blue toe and I'm going to use the grey for the main part. Just a little bit of patterning so far, so I just cast this on last night, and I'm using 2mm needles like the pattern suggests. I haven't knit with 2mm needles for a sock before, but it's creating a very nice dense fabric, so I'm quite happy with that. It has a much higher stitch count than what I would normally knit for myself, but it looks like the sock size will be good. I have a particularly skinny foot for some odd reason, and so this is a bit larger than what I would knit for myself, but it looks like it would still be comfortable for my odd foot, and therefore it should fit perfectly for anyone who doesn't have an odd foot. Yeah, these needles, I think I picked these up in Finland somewhere, and they're very, very pointy. So I had a little bit of difficulty with the cast on. I felt like I was going to poke my eye out. These are also 20cm needles, which are 8 inches, and I've been mostly using 15cm DPNs, which are 6-inch. Is that right? Yep, 6-inch DPNs recently, which are shorter and not quite so dangerous. So it's just taken a little bit of getting used to having such long needles again, but they were the only 2mm needles that I had. What else? So I'm knitting these out of some Regia 4-ply or 4 fabric that I think I picked up in Finland on a trip a few years back, and basic sock yarn. It would be nice if I could knit these socks out of something a little bit more elegant for my sister-in-law, but this is what I've got. It was in stash and I had to cast on. So as I said, if they don't look nice enough with my funny colour choice at the end, then I'll probably just keep these socks for myself and knit her a new pair. So I'm sure that I can get in another pair before Christmas if I need to. So that's the Arctic texture socks, and it's really enjoyable knitting this lacy pattern. It's probably the longest number of stitches for a lace pattern that I've done for socks. So, and it's not too complicated. I'm still looking at the pattern on my iPhone rather than printing it out, so that's a sign that that it doesn't require too much effort to do, for me at least. So that's that one. And I think that's it for my works in progress. I'll probably have one other one next week. That it's my grandmother is having a milestone birthday coming up in November, so I need to make something for her. In the last few years, I've made her some crochet socks and a Normilinto shawl and a doily and a few other things. So one thing that I made her a few years back was a knitted zipper pouch that I put some crocheted flower onto. I think there's a few crocheted flowers on there, and she really liked that, and she's got a lot of use out of it. So I think that I might actually knit her another zipper pouch, but I might use some colour work this time. I'll see. I might sew her something, but it's definitely something that I need to hop onto this week so that it'll get done in time. Acquisitions this week has just been the Arctic texture socks pattern, and I think I'm going to be doing some shopping this week, so there might be some new acquisitions in the next few weeks. I've just been on a bit of a budget lately, and I have a lot of stash, so I might as well use the stash that I have whenever possible. And then just a note on the Aussie Knit Along that's going on in the group. It's running until the end of November, and there are now 13 entries in the finished objects thread, which is fantastic, and lots of wonderful chatter. There are many projects on the go, and it's going to be fantastic to see them get finished up. So some of them just use Australian yarn, some of them just use an Australian designer's pattern, and some of them use both a yarn and a pattern, so they get 2 entries. So if you're interested in that, there's still time to cast something on. There's just over a month to go, and if you had actually started a project before October and it's just been sitting and waiting to get inspiration to pick it up and finish it, then you're welcome to enter as well. And that's it for this week. Yep, that's it. If, as always, if you'd like to get in touch with me, then send me a message on Ravelry or pop into the Ravelry group, and any feedback or questions, let me know. And thanks for subscribing and all that jazz. So thank you, and I'll see you soon.